Imagine a world where one careless rumor could unravel your entire existence. A time when your future, your safety, and your very identity hinged on what everyone around you thought. How did women in 1155 navigate a society where their good name was everything, and how terrifyingly easy was it for that good name to vanish into thin air? Number 1, your life in the legal system was built on trust. In the bustling, often chaotic world of 1155, law and order, as we understand it today, was a far cry from modern courtrooms with irrefutable evidence. Instead, much of justice, especially in local and church courts, relied heavily on oaths, testimonies, and the character of the people speaking. For a woman, this meant that her word, her very voice in a legal setting, carried weight only if her reputation was spotless. Whispers of impropriety or dishonesty followed her. Any testimony she offered, whether as a witness or even as an accuser, would be dismissed faster than a medieval feast after a bad batch of ale. Consider a village dispute over land boundaries, a common enough problem. Perhaps a woman needed to testify that her family had traditionally used a certain meadow. If she was known for being a pious, honest wife and mother, her oath, sworn before God and the community, would be taken seriously. People would believe her because her life demonstrated integrity. But if she had ever been accused of gossiping maliciously, or if there were rumors about her fidelity, or if she was seen as defiant against authority, her testimony could be instantly challenged. The opposing side would simply point to her tarnished reputation, and the court, whether it was the local lord's manorial court or the church's ecclesiastical court, would likely discount her words. Truth, no matter how real, would be deemed unreliable because her character was deemed faulty. This wasn't just about winning or losing a case. It was about protecting her family's interests, their property, and their standing. If a woman couldn't effectively advocate for her household in a legal setting due to her poor reputation, her family could suffer significant losses. They might lose land, goods, or even personal freedom if, for example, a dishonest person successfully accused them of theft and her testimony was the only defense. The repercussions could ripple through generations, impacting their ability to earn a living or secure advantageous marriages for their children. Even more serious were cases involving crimes or accusations of moral transgression. Imagine a woman, the target of unwanted advances, who needed to accuse a man of assault. Her ability to seek justice would be directly tied to her public image. If she was perceived as a woman of virtue and modesty, her accusation might be heard with gravity. However, if she had ever been labeled as loose or provocative by community gossip, her cries for justice could be interpreted as lies, as an attempt to extort money, or even as a deserved consequence of her supposed behavior. The legal system, steeped in patriarchal norms and religious doctrine, often placed the burden of proof, and therefore the burden of moral purity, squarely on the woman. Without an unblemished reputation, her voice simply didn't count, leaving her vulnerable and without recourse. Consequences for a woman losing her legal standing due to a poor reputation could be devastating. She might be ostracized by the community, viewed with suspicion in all interactions. Other women might avoid her company, fearing that association with her could taint their own standing. Men might see her as fair game for exploitation, knowing she had little protection under the law. Family might distance themselves, feeling the shame she brought upon their name. A woman accused of a crime, even a minor one, could find herself unable to defend herself effectively if her word was deemed worthless. She might face fines, public humiliation in the stocks, or even corporal punishment, not because of irrefutable evidence, but because a judge or jury simply did not believe her due to her prior reputation. For instance, if a woman were accused of petty theft and she had a reputation for honesty, she might be believed when she denied it. But if she had a reputation for being cunning or deceitful, even if baseless, her denial would be met with scorn and she would be more likely to be condemned. Church courts, which handled matters of marriage, morality, and blasphemy, were even more stringent regarding a woman's character. If a woman sought an annulment, perhaps on grounds of non-consummation or a pre-contract, her piety and honesty were paramount. A reputation for unchastity or disobedience to God's law would immediately undermine her case. Scholars like Mary Jones, in her examination of medieval legal documents, illustrate how frequently a woman's good fame was cited as a prerequisite for her testimony to be accepted. Without it, her legal standing was effectively non-existent, stripping her of the ability to protect her rights, her body, or her family's future in the eyes of the law. Her good name wasn't just a social nicety, it was the foundation upon which her very ability to survive and seek justice rested. Number 2, your spiritual well-being was judged by all. In the year 1155, the church was not just a building you visited on Sunday, it was the bedrock of society, the ultimate authority on morality, and the guide to salvation. Every aspect of life, from marriage to death, was interwoven with religious doctrine and practice. For women, piety was not just a personal virtue, it was a public performance, and any perceived lapse in spiritual devotion or moral conduct could utterly destroy her reputation, risking not only her earthly standing, but also her immortal soul in the eyes of her community. A woman was expected to be devout, humble, and obedient to God's will, as interpreted by the church and her male guardians. This meant attending Mass regularly, observing fasts, offering prayers, and demonstrating charity. Her outward appearance and behavior were constantly scrutinized. Simple acts like neglecting to wear a head covering in public, or speaking too loudly, or laughing boisterously, could be interpreted as a lack of modesty or reverence. While these might seem trivial today, in 1155, they could spark whispers, leading to a reputation as an irreverent woman, someone who did not respect God or the sanctity of Christian life. Such a reputation could be catastrophic. The most damaging spiritual accusations revolved around heresy, witchcraft, or blasphemy. While the full-blown witch hunts of later centuries were not yet common, accusations of dabbling in folk magic or holding beliefs contrary to church doctrine were serious. If a woman was seen collecting herbs at dusk, or if she offered remedies that seemed too effective, or if she simply had an unusual knowledge of nature, a suspicious neighbor could accuse her of witchcraft. Even if baseless, such accusations, fueled by fear and superstition, could instantly brand her as a danger to the community, risking not only social ostracization, but also interrogation and severe punishment by church authorities. To be accused of heresy, a rejection of core Christian beliefs, was even worse. This could lead to excommunication, stripping her of all social standing, effectively condemning her to isolation and potentially eternal damnation in the eyes of her peers. Beyond these grave accusations, smaller, yet equally insidious, spiritual failings could erode a woman's reputation. Failing to confess sins regularly, or appearing to be unrepentant for transgressions, marked a woman as spiritually lax. If a woman had a child out of wedlock, not only was it a social scandal, but it was a profound religious sin that undermined her piety and placed her outside the grace of God in the community's eyes. If she challenged a priest's authority or questioned church teachings, she risked being labeled defiant and impious, losing the trust and respect of the community and potentially incurring the wrath of local clergy. The consequences of a damaged spiritual reputation were profound. A woman deemed impious or morally corrupt by the church or community could be denied sacraments, such as communion or even last rites, which was terrifying in a deeply religious age where access to these rituals was seen as essential for salvation. She might be publicly shamed, perhaps forced to stand at the church door during services or undergo a public penance. Her marriage prospects, if she was still unmarried, would vanish, as no respectable family would want a woman with a tainted spiritual record. If she was already married, her husband's family might disown her, fearing the shame and potential divine retribution her perceived sins could bring upon their household. Moreover, her ability to participate in community life, which was often centered around the church, would be severely curtailed. She might be excluded from communal feasts, religious festivals, or even the informal networks of support that were vital for survival. For a woman whose social connections often revolved around shared religious practice and charitable works, being spiritually outcast was akin to being socially dead. Accounts from medieval texts and historical research, such as those analyzed by scholar Roberta J. Newman, frequently reveal how the fear of public judgment and spiritual condemnation was a powerful force shaping women's behavior and upholding social order. Her spiritual cleanliness was not merely a personal virtue, it was a public expectation, and any perceived stain could lead to devastating consequences, both in her current life and in the afterlife, as understood by the people of 1155. Number 3, your economic role depended on your good name. While the primary image of medieval women often places them solely in the domestic sphere, many women, particularly those in towns and even on manors, played vital economic roles. They managed households, ran small businesses, engaged in trade, or performed skilled crafts. Unlike men, whose economic standing might be tied to their land or trade guild membership, a woman's economic activity was intrinsically linked to her reputation. Good name was her most valuable currency, allowing her to secure loans, make sales, and engage in fair transactions. Without it, her ability to contribute economically to her household, or even to survive independently, would crumble. Consider a woman who brewed ale, a common and essential enterprise for women in many medieval towns. Her success relied on her customers trusting the quality of her product and her honesty in pricing. If she was known as a woman of integrity, who used good ingredients and didn't shortchange her customers, her business would thrive. People would flock to her stall, confident in her wares. But if a rumor spread that her ale was watered down, or that she used unsanitary practices, or that she was dishonest in her measurements, her reputation as a reliable brewer would be instantly ruined. Customers would abandon her, turning to competitors who had an unblemished name. Her livelihood and potentially her family's main source of income would be destroyed by whispers. This also applied to women involved in trade, such as selling eggs, butter, cheese, or textiles in the market. The medieval marketplace was a place of keen observation and quick judgments. A woman who was perceived as trustworthy would find it easier to establish relationships with suppliers and buyers. She might be granted credit or given favorable prices based on the assumption that she would honor her agreements. But if she gained a reputation for being shrewd in a negative way, for shortchanging buyers, or for failing to pay her debts, she would be swiftly shunned. No one would want to do business with her, and she would find herself unable to access the resources she needed to operate. Her economic life, dependent on trust, would seize up. Even within the domestic sphere, where women managed the household economy, reputation played a crucial part. A wife was expected to be thrifty, efficient, and capable of overseeing servants and resources. If she gained a reputation for being wasteful, incompetent, or for allowing her household to fall into disarray, it reflected poorly not only on her, but on her husband and his family. Such a reputation could lead to social embarrassment for the family, making it harder for them to secure loans or make advantageous alliances. It could also lead to internal strife, as her husband and in-laws might lose trust in her ability to manage their shared wealth, potentially limiting her authority and control over the household. For women of higher status, like noblewomen managing estates in their husband's absence, their economic reputation was even more critical. They had to demonstrate competence in overseeing vast agricultural operations, managing tenants, and dispensing justice on their lands. If a noblewoman was seen as capricious, unfair in her dealings, or unable to control her household, her reputation as a capable lady of the manor would be shattered. This could lead to unrest among her tenants, disrespect from her vassals, and a weakening of the family's overall power and wealth. Scholars who have studied medieval household accounts, such as Janet L. Nelson, highlight how much the effective functioning of an estate depended on the lady's perceived competence and integrity. The economic consequences of a lost reputation were stark. A woman might lose her business, leading to impoverishment for herself and her dependents. She might be unable to find employment, as employers would be wary of hiring someone with a questionable character. She might be forced into more precarious and less reputable forms of labor, further cementing her bad name. For example, a woman who lost her brewing business might be forced to resort to begging or even prostitution to survive, each step downward further solidifying her social and economic ruin. Economic independence, however limited, would be completely eroded, leaving her vulnerable and dependent in a society that offered few safety nets. Her very ability to earn a living was held hostage by the community's opinion of her character. Number 4, your social standing was a fragile construct. Imagine living in a world where your entire place in society, from the invitations you received to the respect you commanded, was built on an invisible, constantly shifting foundation of public opinion. In 1155, a woman's social standing was exactly that, a delicate construct, meticulously maintained by her reputation and capable of collapsing with the slightest breath of scandal. Her social value, her family's honor, and her access to community networks were all intrinsically linked to how she was perceived by others. From the highest noblewoman to the humblest peasant woman, social interaction was everything. For the nobility, attending tournaments, feasts, and church services was not just leisure. It was a way to display wealth, forge alliances, and reinforce status. A noblewoman's reputation for grace, piety, and hospitality was paramount. If she was known for being gossipy, quarrelsome, or if there were rumors about her personal conduct, invitations to important events might cease. Other noble families might avoid alliances with her family, fearing that her tarnished name could sully their own. Children might find it harder to secure advantageous marriages if their mother's reputation was suspect. The shame associated with a socially disgraced woman could reverberate through her entire lineage, impacting generations. Chronicles from the period, while often focused on men's deeds, occasionally hint at the social downfall of women whose behavior strayed from societal expectations, illustrating how quickly they could be shunned. For women in towns, social life revolved around marketplaces, guilds, and neighborhood networks. Belonging to a respectable household and having a good name allowed a woman to participate in communal activities, join religious fraternities, and enjoy the support of her neighbors. Women often formed informal support systems, helping each other with childcare, illness, and daily chores. But if a woman gained a reputation for being a nuisance, for being uncharitable, for neglecting her duties, or for simply having a sour disposition, these vital social ties could be severed. She might find herself excluded from conversations, denied assistance when needed, and generally isolated within her own community. The lack of social support in a medieval world that lacked formal welfare systems could be a matter of life or death, especially in times of illness or hardship. Even for peasant women, whose lives were perhaps more circumscribed by the demands of agricultural labor, social standing within their small village was crucial. Being considered a good woman in the village meant respect from neighbors, the ability to find help with harvesting, or assistance during childbirth. It meant that her children would be welcomed by other families. A peasant woman was seen as lazy or ill-tempered, or if she engaged in petty theft, her reputation could make her an outcast. She might be shunned by her fellow villagers, making daily life incredibly difficult. Imagine needing help tending to a sick child, or borrowing an essential tool, only to find everyone in the village refusing to assist you because your reputation has preceded you. Tools of social destruction were often subtle but effective: whispers, snubs, and calculated exclusion. A simple turning of the back at a social gathering, a deliberate omission from a shared meal, or the cold shoulder given by other women in the church could communicate social condemnation more powerfully than any direct accusation. A woman's social value was also tied to her ability to produce legitimate heirs and uphold the sanctity of her marriage. If she was suspected of adultery or of being barren, her social standing could plummet, leading to significant personal and familial distress. Historians like Sarah Foote emphasize how profoundly medieval society valued adherence to established norms of behavior, particularly for women, and how quickly deviations could lead to social disgrace. The consequences of losing one's social standing were devastating. A woman might find herself alone, without friends or allies, making her vulnerable to exploitation or abuse. Family might experience collateral damage, finding it harder to arrange marriages for their children or to conduct business. She might be subjected to public shaming rituals, such as being paraded through the streets or having scandalous songs sung about her. In an age where community was the primary safety net and source of identity, being socially ostracized was a slow, agonizing form of death, stripping a woman of her dignity, her connections, and her place in the world. Her very existence became a testament to her lost honor, an ongoing punishment inflicted by the very people she lived among. Number 5, your marriage prospects were non-existent without purity. In 1155, for almost all women, marriage was not just a romantic aspiration. It was the fundamental gateway to social legitimacy, economic stability, and the only respectable path to adulthood. It was the means by which families secured alliances, consolidated wealth, and ensured their lineage. For a woman, her primary currency in this crucial transaction was her virginity before marriage and her fidelity within it. Her reputation for purity was not merely a virtue, It was the absolute cornerstone of her marriage prospects, and any stain on that reputation could shatter her entire future, leaving her an outcast, often with no means of support. The concept of virginity was paramount. For a young woman, her intact physical purity was a direct reflection of her family's honor. Daughter who maintained her virginity until marriage demonstrated her father's ability to control his household and protect his family's honor. Her virginity was a valuable asset, part of her dowry, a promise of legitimate heirs, and a symbol of her moral uprightness. If a woman was rumored to have lost her virginity outside of marriage, or if she was even suspected of engaging in inappropriate behavior, her marriage prospects would evaporate. No respectable family would want to unite their lineage with one that carried such a stain. Scholars like Anne L. Klink have detailed how intensely medieval society valued and policed female chastity, seeing it as foundational to social order. Consider a young woman from a good family, perhaps with a decent dowry. She might be considered an eligible bride for a suitable match. But if whispers began to circulate that she had been too familiar with a young man, or that she had been seen alone with someone in a compromising situation, her value on the marriage market would plummet. Even if the rumors were completely false, the damage would be done. Families seeking a bride for their son would quickly dismiss her, opting instead for a woman with an unblemished reputation, even if her dowry was smaller. Families shamed by the rumors would struggle to find her a husband, perhaps being forced to accept a much less advantageous match or face the unbearable prospect of her never marrying at all. Once married, a woman's reputation for fidelity was equally, if not more, critical. Adultery, especially on the part of a wife, was considered a grievous sin against God, against her husband, and against the entire social order. It threatened the legitimacy of heirs, undermining the very foundation of property inheritance and family lineage. If a wife was suspected of infidelity, her reputation would be utterly destroyed. Her husband might divorce her, a difficult but possible legal process in the church courts, especially if he could prove her unchastity. She might be sent away in disgrace, banished from her home and family, or even forced into a convent. In some severe cases, depending on local customs and the status of the parties involved, she could face public humiliation or even violence, though this was less common by 1155 compared to earlier periods. The shame would not just fall on her, but on her entire birth family, potentially damaging their alliances and future marriage opportunities. Consequences for a woman who could not secure a respectable marriage due to a tarnished reputation were dire. She would be an unmarried woman, a status often viewed with suspicion and pity. Without a husband, she had no social protector, no legitimate path to property ownership or economic security. She might be forced to live with her family as a dependent, enduring their shame and resentment, or she might have to seek work as a domestic servant, often for meager wages and with little social standing. Options were severely limited, often leading to a life of poverty, dependence, and social marginalization. She might even be forced into desperate measures for survival, such as begging or prostitution, which would further cement her ignominy and seal her fate as an outcast. The very fabric of her existence, which was designed around the institution of marriage, would be torn apart by the slightest hint of impurity, leaving her with no viable future. Number 6, your family's honor rested on your behavior. In the intertwined world of 1155, personal identity was rarely distinct from family identity. Your name, your lineage, and your standing in the community were inextricably tied to the honor of your family unit. For a woman, this connection was particularly intense. Her behavior, her choices, and her reputation were not merely her own. They were a direct reflection on her entire family, from her parents and siblings to her husband's kin and even future generations. A woman's good name was a precious asset that could elevate her family, while a single lapse in judgment could shatter their honor, bringing widespread shame and devastating consequences. Imagine a young woman, daughter of a well-respected merchant family. Family success and social climb depended not just on their wealth, but on their reputation for honesty, piety, and respectability. This daughter maintained an impeccable reputation for modesty, obedience, and virtue. She would be seen as a credit to her family. This would enhance their standing in the community, making it easier for her father to secure good trade deals and for her brothers to find favorable wives. Own marriage prospects would be excellent, as respectable families would eager to ally themselves with such a virtuous lineage. Daughters' good behavior directly contributed to the family's social capital, their collective standing and influence. Conversely, if that same daughter were to engage in scandalous behavior, perhaps by openly flirting, defying her father's wishes, or worse, becoming pregnant out of wedlock, the shame would fall not just on her, but on her entire family. Family's carefully constructed reputation would be instantly damaged. Neighbors would whisper, other families would look askance, and their standing in the community would plummet. Father might find his business dealings complicated, as potential partners might be wary of associating with a family deemed dishonorable. Her brothers might struggle to find wives from good families, as no family would want their daughter to marry into a lineage tainted by scandal. The dishonor, like a corrosive acid, would eat away at the family's social, economic, and political foundations. This collective responsibility extended to married women as well. A wife's conduct reflected directly on her husband's family. If she was a diligent manager of the household, a pious and charitable woman, and a faithful wife, she brought honor and prestige to her new family. She contributed to their good name, making them look prosperous, well-ordered, and respectable. But if she was seen as wasteful, lazy, rebellious, or most damagingly unfaithful, she brought profound shame upon her husband, his parents, and his entire clan. Actions could be seen as an insult to their name, a threat to their lineage, due to the potential for illegitimate heirs, and a stain on their collective reputation. The consequences of this shared honor were severe. Family disgraced by a woman's behavior could suffer socially, being excluded from important events and networks. They might face economic repercussions, as trust is essential for business and trade in a medieval context. They could even face legal challenges, as a reputation for dishonesty or immorality could undermine their standing in court. Historians studying medieval family structures, such as Joanne McNamara, underline how much the behavior of individual members, especially women, was seen as directly impacting the collective status and future of the entire kin group. Pressure on women to uphold family honor was immense, shaping every aspect of their lives, from their attire and speech to their friendships and daily routines. They were constantly aware that their actions were under scrutiny, not just for their own sake, but for the sake of their parents, siblings, husband, and children. The potential for a woman's misstep to unravel generations of carefully built reputation meant that her good name was not merely a personal attribute. It was a communal treasure, fiercely protected by all members of the family and vigilantly policed by the wider society. The loss of her reputation meant the potential ruination of her entire family's standing, a burden so heavy it shaped every choice she made.